Welcome back and Happy New Year again. We are at another one of the What Pays, What Problem Are You Solving feedback sessions. We have a very full house. Happy to see everyone here. It's going to be an exciting time. There's going to be lots of good feedback given, and you're going to see how the sausage is made. So with that, anything else before we kick off? Ty, Adam, want to get right into it. We've only got an hour.
All right, the less we say. I notice I didn't say 15 minutes for each or 20. I said a third, and a third. Section 1, technique. Section 2, analysis. Section 3, decision. Let's get into it. Jay, what problem are you solving?
Great. So Javian is our founder extraordinaire tonight. Thank you for coming back on, Javian. It's good seeing you again.
Had a great time.
Thank you, buddy.
All right. So as we dive in, first give us a quick overview of what problem are you solving and for whom?
Yeah. So originally when I started, I was trying to solve the problem of the financial aid fiasco that was going on at a lot of HBCUs in the country. Basically to explain that, it was a lot of, I would say, what I originally thought miscommunication between offices. So a lot of students were struggling to move in with housing because financial aid said that their money wasn't there, but then the student was pulling out the right amount of loans. And it was just this whole big issue that we were really trying to understand what was going on. As we went down that path for the past year, we kind of understood that that wasn't really what we wanted to solve, and it was a bigger problem than we could really had the resources to solve. So we understood that financial literacy was a big problem. So we kind of pivoted to that. And we started focusing on the financial literacy education for students. And as we started to do more research on that and started to talk to more students in schools, we understood that there was a big engagement issue within the classroom, which is what we're now focusing on. After talking with a lot of friends and even students within the middle school and high school around, kids are just tired of looking at the whiteboard and learning nowadays. And so we wanted to try to do something different, whether it was gamifying it or using some sort of way to be able to spice up learning, to raise those reading and writing scores, and to kind of combat the engagement levels that had kind of crashed right after COVID. So that's the short version of it.
All right, so I'm trying to manage the 10-person. Tell us about your process. How did you go out? Obviously, we're going to try to focus on evidence and not just big ideas.
Well, let's back up a half a step.
All right.
He didn't answer the question. The question was, what's the problem and who's the customer? What he did was explore projects, right? There's this engagement problem. Well, who's going to pay for the engagement problem? So who's the customer in that? Could you address that piece?
So the customers would be the schools. Okay. So a specific person, from what we're now starting, because we're right in that spot right now. So what we're now understanding is we're assuming the Board of Education, superintendent, principal, those would be the people that would sign off on a check in order to pay us. So those would be our customers.
So then to step into that a little bit, as a customer, that group of people are horrible, evil people. They have budgets that are 2-year or 4-year budget cycles. Yep. And so when you ask them to pay for something out of new money, then it may be a 3 to 4 to 5 year cycle before you get to the point where they have money to spend. And of the money that's already allocated, there's a little tiny window when they forgot to spend it, where you might be able to pick it up out of a thing, but it's entirely unpredictable. And so this is the education app story that we tell in My Open Coffee, which is you have a 13-year-old girl using an app that's an education app. Who's the customer? Is it the girl? Is it the parents? Is it the grandparents? Is it the teacher? Is it the principal? Is it the education group inside the school or inside the district? Or is it the state education people? Or is it the nonprofit that wants 13-year-old girls to do STEM? You know, there's about 15 choices. Yeah. And so when you said, oh, it's the school, they're the worst of the whole pile of 15 because of the sales cycle and the politics and a whole bunch of things.
Hold up. I'm going to jump in a second there, John, because it depends on the type of school.
Two sentences.
Okay.
And so then in the process of doing that, there's a bunch of places where your goal should be to get paid quickly. And so you need to feel around to the audience that would care, right? And Becca might have an answer of, oh, there's some schools that don't have this problem.
So having worked in the ed sector in education nonprofits, directly in education, and with charter schools and public schools for the last 15 years, I can tell you definitely it's not a monolith, right? So everything that Jon was just pointing out, broad strokes, is true. As soon as you start dealing with district level situations, you're talking multi-year in advance budgetary planning. You've hit on a key problem that students are struggling with. They do not feel as engaged in the classroom. This showed up in interviews I did all over the country as part of my own research recently, that COVID kind of like fractured some things, of people being like, wait a second, I have other options in how I learn stuff and I'm not engaged, right? So you're right there that there's something there. But I think that Jon's hitting on a key point about who is it that's going to pay to address that problem. If you look at charter schools, they have a higher motivation, and if they are a smaller network, they cannot pay you as much up front, but they have a smaller decision-making window, and they have higher motivation to pay attention to student engagement and enrollment because they're competing for enrollment because there are choices to be made there. Whereas when you're talking public school districts, they're less motivated. They give a lot of lip service to student belonging and student engagement, but they very rarely put dollars towards it. And the larger the district or the larger the charter network, the less likely they are to take an action on something like that because they have, yeah, exactly.
All right, I'm using my one wild card of the whole hour, and I even typed it. This is cool with the two screens. I have it up now. I can type in stuff for the rest of the hour. Colleen and I actually had this conversation based on last month's recording, and this comes up every single time. And I actually think I have a solution on how we at least structure the hour, because it's going to fly by. And I agree with of course I agree with all of you. What problem are you solving is the user. They might be the payer, but they are the person that you're solving a problem for. It's the desirability, feasibility, and viability in design thinking. That's how we're starting. You don't have to agree with me, but that's how, otherwise we're going to spend the whole hour shifting back towards the business model and the whole way the idea is structured. We just simply don't have enough time. I think this conversation is something that needs to happen. And I do think viability is an important piece of this. But for the sake of the hour, the technique question will be focused on what questions most of it will be questioned on what problem are you solving, with a little bit of what pays. The evidence will be whatever the evidence is. Okay, it doesn't matter what our opinion is for that middle section. It's what did he learn himself. The third section on what are you doing next, I agree that that's probably where we can start to get into, like, because let's face it, we do have experience, especially in, I agree, especially ed tech, like 50 different stakeholders, no exaggeration. Let's see how, and I won't interrupt again, but let's see what happens if we frame the next 20 minutes in what problem are you solving first, what pays second. Everyone else does what pays, and I agree it's valid, but let's be different, not for the sake of being different. Let's see if there's the technique on the users, who has the problem, evidence on the users, but yes, evidence on the payer is going to be required, and then decision making based on the evidence. I know it's not going to work out exactly that way.
To follow that thread, when you say engagement, is that a problem for the student, or is that a problem for the teacher, or is that a problem? So when you go look at the 15 choices that I just outlined, each of those have different problems and different goals. So which of those problems are you trying to solve? The parent's problem, the student's problem, the teacher's problem, and then the other piece is some one of those needs to be a payer in that process, right? So it may not be a problem for the student that they're not engaged. They might be totally happy to be thumbing their way through ChatGPT in the middle of class and not paying any attention.
I think that's a great point, and I think it's funny because me and Smith literally just had a conversation on this. We're starting to approach it where we need to ask questions on what is engagement and what does that mean. So answering that question right now from what I understood before we were actually about to get into these interviews and asking these students these questions, it was originally solving the student engagement. Because speaking from experience, going to college and going to school, I hate sitting in front of a whiteboard all day just listening to a teacher talk. It's boring. Like I was using, respectfully, love y'all, shout out to Bowie State, I was using ChatGPT to do a lot of my stuff and I passed. So I was just like, hey, cool, I'm getting by. But then at the end of the day, 10 to 15, 20 years down the line, what is that doing for me when I'm in my field, when I'm in my career? It's not helping me with anything. Because when you get hired for that job at Apple, Google, whatever, wherever you're going, if you're lucky to get there, they don't want you going to typing stuff and dropping stuff into ChatGPT. So it's not effectively and efficiently helping you learn. So I think we understood that. And now we're trying to figure out, okay, well, how can we use something that's actually going to help a student be engaged, and sorry if I'm not answering the question directly, but be engaged where they're actually taking the information that they're learning and able to apply it, especially in future use cases.
So are you asking the question, how can students be more effective at learning because they want to learn and be better professionals? Or are you asking the question, how do schools make students more effective?
I would say, how do schools make students more effective? Because I believe that's up to the school.
Right. So it's not a student problem, it's a school problem. In the way you're framing it. Am I hearing you right?
Yes. No, I would, I think you are.
So, you know, let me ask the fundamental question. Will that job at Google still be there in 4 years? And so it is not clear to me that the current process of training for the job that is a degree away is actually an effective mechanism, right? And so that it may be, in fact, that you need to learn ChatGPT just to be hitting minimum barrier of the bar, because everybody's doing that. And then the question is, how do you move from the bottom 25% to the top 25% so you get the job with the salary instead of look like everybody else, right? And so
yes,
again, you have to match the who's the customer with what's the problem enough that you can get the thing to go. And at least in my mind, I keep pushing on why you should look for the customer that will pay you quickly. So that customer problem fit question is fundamental, and diving into the details of how all of the engagement works seems troublesome because you can get lost in the rabbit hole. So what's the short question that you could ask that would help you identify what are the problems that students are having? Because maybe engagement is not the student's number one problem.
I think that's a great point. I'm processing.
And my wife tells me, because I like to think about many things at once, that you can only think about 3 things at once. If it's not a top 3 problem, it's not a problem at all. And so you have to figure out for the students, what's a top 3 problem in their education, right? For the school teacher, what's a top 3 problem for their teaching process? For the administrator, what's a top 3 problem? And those don't look like the questions we were seeing.
Yep. Well, now give me grace. Those questions were made like 2-3 months ago, I was about to say.
So you got some new data. Good.
Definitely. Yeah. So no, but I definitely agree with that. I think that's very important. From what you said, World Economic Forum just dropped a report on like skills of the next couple of years, especially coming in with like jobs with AI and stuff like that that's going on. I know one of them that was on there was like problem solving skills. I think some of like the top, like I think 5 or 6 of the skills are problem solving. Now my assumption from going to school with other people, I haven't backed it with data yet, but a lot of kids in Gen Z aren't good at problem solving skills. So I think that's one of the things that, talking with my co-founder, we wanted to focus on, is being able to, and I think that's where I struggle, is asking questions that are broad enough where I'm not giving them the answer. So if you look at a lot of those questions now, a lot of questions we're asking is kind of giving them the answer, leading them in the direction of the answer. And I know, again, I was talking with Smith about this, is like asking questions that are broad enough where they can get, they're not giving us the answer that we're looking for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, all of these are not customer problem fit questions.
Yeah,
they're I have a solution in mind. Let me find out the details about the solution.
Yep.
So you can't talk about any of the solution. The questions are, what are the things get in the way for your day? What's unsatisfactory for you? How are you solving those problems now? What do you like about those solutions? What do you not like about those solutions? And they're all open-ended questions about where does it hurt and why are you staying up at night and what would you wave a wand to change, right? Those are all really very generic questions, just trying to bring out the problem, right? And you would ask the students that question, you would ask teachers that question, you would ask the parents that question, and go through the 15 different piles trying to figure out what the pieces are, right?
Yep. I completely agree.
And
I think,
out of that, you should get more than 15 businesses. And then you can shuffle the businesses to find out which will get to cash flow positive fastest.
So,
that's good game.
To kind of keep things back onto the first third for Adam, explain the technique. Explain who you've talked to lately, like what kind of data do you have recently, and how did you approach them? Where did you find them? All those kind of questions.
So recently spoke with like at least over 60 students. And then I would say we've hit just around 10 teachers. A lot of them were from internal connections. My aunt, she is a part of the New Jersey Black Alliance of Superintendents, and that's like at least 13 to 15 people, like superintendents that are part of that group. So we got connected with the president, and he connected us with a lot of people that are slowly integrating us into their school system to talk with teachers, interview them, and also talk with a lot of their students. So that's a lot of the information. That's where we got a lot of our sources from. So basically my internal network, which was cool. When it comes to the questions we were asking, we just now realize we need to get way broader and stop focusing so much on pinpointing certain questions. Because before we were asking like, what type of games do you like? Why do you like those games? We were trying to figure out how to build our product because we thought, building this gamified platform, that was gonna be the end all solution. Like that was great. And so we were asking a lot of that. And then on the back end, we were trying to build something for the teachers, like a dashboard where they would be able to kind of just have an all-in-one system. Because one of the things we found out from talking with teachers was their grading and where they inputted their grades and their their curriculum was on one end, and then where they did the attendance was in a completely different program. So we found that teachers had a lot of frustration with having to use Google Classroom and Genesis and all these different platforms instead of just having it all in one where they could update all these things. And then another big thing we found out from teachers is how important data is to understanding where their students are at in the classroom. So that's a big thing we learned from the teacher side. And we also, more from the student side, again, we were just super focused on trying to figure out what they liked in games. So we didn't really get as much valuable information now looking back as we should have. So I'm very interested in going back and speaking more with students with those broader questions. So yeah.
All right, so we're going to save the last time we rushed through what are the next steps. I want to save a full 20 minutes on next steps because it's going to be how, what you learned, which teachers you're going to interview, what I think we can even spend the full, I know most of the people have their own framework. I see in the chat, Craig is talking about triggers, and I know Jon has his techniques. So I almost think it's worthwhile, I don't want to call it a script because I'm not always a fan of scripts, but an outline. Who are you trying to interview? What are you trying to learn? I love that you said, even though it might have been the wrong learning objective, you had a learning objective that was tied to building the product, but you at least had a learning objective. I think if we refocus that, who you want to talk to, what are you trying to learn from them? Why are you trying to learn that thing? And then what are you going to ask them to learn that thing? I think we can spend a really solid 20 minutes at the end building that. I'm tempted to do that now, but let's stick a little bit more with a couple more minutes on technique. Then, what did you learn? But then I want to pivot hard to looking forward. But I think you still generated some evidence and some stuff that'll inform next steps. So let's Let's spend 5 more minutes, even though we're kind of over time. All right, 3 more minutes on technique.
So knowing Javion as I do, I have to give him his propers. I give him a shout out now because he started as a CPG guy, right? So he had hoodies and sweatshirts and all the, and he had an entire, so it was fairly easy to go from, do you like this without hood or with a hood? Do you like this fuzzy or straight? But to move into this environment to say, so I see something, but I don't know how to answer, how to position my observations or position the questions to make sure I can get the return on the effort to find the data that is, I don't have a thing to build. I'm actually doing, as Jon, you said, customer problem fit. It's a little easier when you have a hoodie and people go, oh, that's a dope hoodie. I like that. That's cool. Great. What do you like about it? Hey, could you make it with this? I'll be right back. Let me go place an order. And so it's been a hell of a learning exercise. I mean, this is 18, almost 2 years, 18 months of this. So just want to position that as we talk about and give him the advice on how he needs to position the questions. It's just an observation and a point of reference.
I appreciate that.
It's the truth.
I
still don't mean I ain't gonna kick your ass around it, but that's a whole nother issue.
Yeah. No, I feel you. I feel you.
I think in general, though, Jay, finding a smaller number of questions to ask, and then asking secondary questions based upon the answer that you get. What do you use today? How happy are you with it? What prevents you from changing something? That, and the best interviewers, like if you see them on, 2020 or 60 Minutes, they start with 3 or 5 questions. It's all they've got. And everything they do is what makes you say that, or paraphrasing the last 2 or 3 words. In time, in blue, by Wednesday, that's where I find digging deeper. Instead of trying to interrogate somebody, how do you interview them?
I think that's a great point, because I think that's the hardest part with some of these students is like you ask the question and they're like for example, like I don't know, what did you do in class today? Yeah, we just read. Oh, what did you read? I don't know, I don't remember. And I'm just like, like I don't know where to go with it from there. So I think I'm trying to really understand, because I think like just the type of person I am, it's pretty easy for me to talk to the kids, but then I don't want them to be uncomfortable where they feel like they can't open up. So I'm trying to find that balance where it's like, how can I ask you questions where I find the information I need, but also not get those short answers like that?
Can I role play that? But because if they said to me, I don't remember, I would say, you don't remember?
Understand where you're coming from.
And now they'll give you more. Oh, well, maybe it was something. But when you just, it's amazing how those last 2 or 3 words and you just say them back with an inquisitive voice.
Okay.
Try it on your parents or your girlfriend or boyfriend one day and watch what happens.
Yeah. I do that sometimes. I just didn't think to use it in that situation. So that's a good one. I appreciate that.
All right. I think all of us are going to start. I'm seeing the temptation, not just by me, but by all of us, to kind of fix the interviews. And I think that's valuable. I think we should do it, because I was already going to say, like, yeah, it's also about finding what they're doing to solve the problem is a good follow-up question, instead of just asking what they hate, what they like, or what they don't like is a good way to pull stuff out of them. So I will be fully disciplined. By 10:10, we're on to the future. Let's spend 15 minutes. What evidence is what direct quote? This was the thing that it wasn't Matt's fault from last week. It was my fault for not like focusing. What are some direct quotes, not just like general interpretations and insights, good or bad? I think a lot of times in these calls, especially in pitch competitions, people just focus on the validation. We hear that word thrown a lot. Like, what were some direct quotes of people not having the problem, people neutral of the problem? Like, let's spend 15 minutes on direct quotes with some sort of vector, neutral. What was the biggest, strongest quote you have in all of the? I know that we're gonna iterate on the technique. What was the worst quote? What was the best quote? What was the most surprising quote? Quotes.
So I'll start from the very very beginning that kind of led us down to this path. And then I'll kind of focus more on what happened. I know like one of the first quotes that we got was when we sat down and talked with the financial aid officer at Bowie State, and she was, man, she basically said something about if there was a application that gamified the education or the results when it came to teaching students about financial aid, she's like that would be amazing. And I didn't think much of it until I had a conversation with Smith, and he was like, that's gold. Like, why don't you like work with that and try to test that out? So that's kind of when we pivoted to the gamification thing. Then going down the road, when we cold called about 300 colleges this past summer, or maybe 2 summers ago, I can't remember. And we were talking with schools about, you know, what was their issues with financial aid, you know, what kind of problems they were having. One of the things that one of the ladies told us was like, you know, we think it's great that you guys are working on financial literacy. Like a lot of high schools and middle schools need help with that. So we think that like that's great information, and you should probably focus on that more. So we took that as like, oh, okay, cool. Like let's go down that route. So that's when we pivoted on focusing more, leaving the financial aid issues alone and focusing more on the financial literacy. Now coming to this point when we've kind of started figuring out the engagement thing and talking with students about that. Again, with the quote, I feel like it's kind of biased because when we talk to a lot of students, it's about the games and what they liked. So it's not really had to do with the engagement problem. I will say some of the things we did get with the teachers when we were asking them about how they struggled with engagement, if they had any problems with it. We got maybe 1 or 2 teachers that said they had issues with it, but a lot of teachers we spoke to were actually good teachers. So they said that the systems they had in place now were very effective for them. I remember one of the teachers we talked to, he was a math teacher, and he was saying that one of the programs that he used, he's like, I love it. Like, you know, user interface is great. He's like, you know, for your product, like I would say really focus on user interface because that's simple, but I mean, love the user interface, and I don't really see any problems I have with, you know, engagement when it comes to students. So that was one thing that we were just kind of, we were interested in. I'm trying to think any other quotes. I mean, I can name quotes all day from talking with kids my age about just engagement in the classroom. And
hold up, I have a question for you because you displayed a jump there, right? So you were focusing on financial aid in college, then you were focusing on financial literacy in high school, and then you jumped to generalized engagement in high school. And what led to that jump?
I'm sorry. So yes, what we're still focusing on now is teaching that financial literacy. That's like that's our quote unquote selling point. Because when we spoke with a lot of people, that a lot of even the principal that I spoke with, very close to the principal of my old high school, he was like, yeah, we need this. And they have a really good financial literacy program in New Jersey. He was still saying something gamified would be cool. So what we understood after doing more research, we just felt like, okay, selling financial literacy was enough. We know we wanted to gamify something. So as we looked online and to give us an initial basis to, because we just felt like what we were doing wasn't enough. So we also started seeing that engagement was at an all-time low in the country. And, you know, we saw that reading and writing scores are at an all-time low, et cetera. So that's when we took that. We said, okay, this is great information. This is something we can use as a selling point. And then we started actually trying to confirm the data or the information that we found by talking with teachers about it.
So point of clarification, define engagement.
Engagement to me is being able to sit in the classroom and pay attention to what the teacher is teaching for a continuous amount of time.
Right. And because where I'm going with that is that could look very differently depending on how the student processes information, right? Some people are auditory learners, some people are, you know, the visual learners, etc. Some need to touch something and play with something to learn, right? So that can look different depending on the different types of teachers and students as well. So, and then how do you know when you've improved engagement? That's the follow-on question, right? Because, you know, where's your baseline you're starting with that you see as a problem, this amorphous term called engagement, and then how do you know when you've solved it? Is it eyeballs on screen, eyeballs on teacher, number of reduced times they take their phone out of their pocket? So I would be very curious to see what success looks like in this engagement metric too.
Yes, I think that's a great question because that's one of the things we were thinking about when it came to KPIs. for measuring, and it's somewhere in my notes. I got KPIs to measure.
Nice.
When it came to engagement, and I'm so mad I don't have it pulled up right now.
It's all good.
But yeah, I think that's a really good point. When we looked at how to measure it, I gotta see if I can find it, and then maybe I can send it to you later. But yeah, and I think that's what we just are finding out, is that it's such a broad subject. It's not easy as like someone just looking at a board and like, okay, they're engaged. And now that's what we're trying to understand. Like I said in the beginning, like, okay, what is engagement, and like how do we define that? So I wish I had an answer, but I think that.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. If I were you, I'd be very curious about what does that look like, and if you're all into gamification, how are you going to show that there's some sort of demonstrable improvement when you get there?
Do you think that engagement is the job to be done, or the pain that they're experiencing, and the job to be done would be better scholastic outcomes for students?
Job to be done would be better scholastic outcome for students. Or quote unquote, what we believe like was raising those engagement levels, raising those reading and writing scores. Because respectfully, I mean, if you look at it from a broader sense, our education, and we're competing with other countries right now. And I mean, other countries are killing us.
Are you competing with other countries? I mean, I'm joking. I'm just
okay. I was about to say, if you look at me, but and I think it's a shame that you have a lot of these kids that are like struggling right now in school just to read and write. Like I didn't have that issue when I was a kid. Now I would say I'm a pretty smart kid, and shout out to my parents, good genes. But it's like a lot of people. So for some people, it's not like that. But I also don't think it has to be like that for everybody. If you look at a lot of environments, if you look at a way, and this is getting into other problems, but I just believe that there's easier ways to be able to raise those things, and there's more engaging ways to do it. I mean, there's also a whole amount of other factors when you have the teachers, like teachers decreasing in schools, and the pay, and there's just a whole bunch of other factors that add to it. But I think that's a good point. Like I really do think that it's raising the scholastic scores that we're aiming to make the job to be done.
So then maybe engagement is just one of the gains or pains or gains that they're looking for. And you could start to, if you could in the interviews learn about more of their pains and gains, it might be easier to figure out how you can sort of trace that back into better outcomes. And just, I understand what you're saying exactly with engagement. I have a niece who's 10, and her primary years where you start to learning to read were spent at home during the pandemic, so not the same as the militant lifestyle I grew up with, where like you had to read all the time, and it was like a fundamental of it. And so I just think of that logic of engagement is one word that you're focused on right now, but you've already just in there, like teachers also are lacking in engagement because there's no financial reward, or not enough financial reward behind what they're doing. There's cuts to their budget. There's cuts to what they have access to in the classrooms, right? So there's going to be a lot of things inside of their beyond engagement that will help you to understand. There might be an easier path, I guess is what I mean, to triggering someone to go, okay, yeah, I can see how that will give us better outcomes, because the engagement part might be harder to measure and prove that it is creating the demonstrable change that they're looking for. But I would just like look at that, do the sort of value proposition work around pains, gains, and jobs to be done.
Okay, that's good stuff. That's good game. I appreciate it.
We actually
the broadness of the mush that we're talking about is really difficult. We haven't focused in tightly enough to be able to actually run an experiment and get to a yes or no. And so, does the school system have problems? Yes, you just listed 1,000 of them. You as an entrepreneur have a fundamental problem of being paid in the next 3 months. In my mind, my worldview is short term, get paid in the short term, and then use that, whatever you're getting paid, to grow to the next level of big, right? And so you should be able to do a thing right now that would produce cash. The mechanism I press people towards is monetizing a content strategy. And so if you are engaging in asking people questions and they answer the question, this is what I do now to solve that problem, you're basically building the competitive matrix. If you then say, if I have this problem, I could use A or B, and A works better in this situation and B works better in that situation, and I just map out my competitive matrix and I charge people for the detailed information. For example, running Zoom workshops, here's an overview, and then if you want more detail, pay me $25 to go to my next Zoom meeting about the details of that solution. The people that jump into the paid Zoom are more qualified to being customers than the people that are randomly on the street saying blah, blah, blah. And so the act of qualifying and then actively building your competitive matrix then builds you a way of generating revenue as a mechanism of validating that they're customers, right? They are willing to spend money to solve the problem. And now that's the people you want to interview and ask tell me where you're stranding, right? Why are you in this room? Right? Yeah. I'm doing this talk about this particular learning tool. You paid me money to be in this room. Why did you come to this room? And now that's a group of people that have been qualified, who then you should, talk to 100 of that kind of person, and then get to the specifics about where the 2% of those 100 people are the early adopters that have that insight that will fundamentally change your conversation. So down inside there is an urgency on specifics for me.
Got you. That makes sense.
So Colleen put in the chat, I think this is important, and I'm going to come to you, Rebecca, because of everybody in here, I think you have the most to say about what I'm about to say about something that Javion and I worked with. Colleen said, we're talking about a lot about viability, but I'm still not sure I understand what the problem is for a specific customer. And so Rebecca, one of the things that Javion and I had talked about is engagement. Okay, cool. To do what? I'm still not exactly sure. And what we got to was engagement leads to mastery, right? It leads to that I am able to do something because I was able to pay attention. And if I'm paying attention to the teacher can get through the lesson plan to make sure that at the end of it, I get mastery. And then the mastery is, there's what do they have in the Common Core? Like, can you pass? I don't know what the tests are in New Jersey, but can you pass these tests to make sure that you have mastery? And so the engagement became the throughput. And the one thing you were talking about, how do we know whether or not we're solving it? And this is where I come to you, Rebecca. We started talking about Bloom's taxonomy, which is a measurement tool that goes from I saw it all the way up to I don't need you anymore. I can now do it by myself. And as a matter of fact, I can do it so well, I can do it better than you because I'm that involved in the steps of acquisition, knowledge acquisition, which is, Javion, write that down, knowledge acquisition. Right? Because ultimately that's what you're trying to get them. Because if I can watch you, I'm engaged. I'm now, if I'm engaged, I'm acquiring something, even at the point of what color is this? This is pink. Good. You figured it out. Next step, right? And proving it out that way. So Bloom's taxonomy was a piece that we had not talked about, which was I want you to do, Javion, is just think about what that might look like, right? What would mastery look like if I was engaged? That means I'm engaged with the topic. I'm engaged with the teacher. I'm engaged with the environment. It's not just engagement for engagement's itself. Does that sound right, Rebecca? Something along that line?
Yeah. Yeah, so I agree Bloom's taxonomy can be a useful way to think that through for what you're thinking about, JB. I agree that with broader point of like jobs to be done versus pains and gains around like what is the function of engagement. I also agree that you're latching onto this because you were picking up on something that is a national trend from what I saw from talking with students all over the country. They are bothered by the fact that are we allowed to curse in this podcast or are we keeping it clean?
I'll let it slide.
Okay.
PG-13.
They're bothered by I'll keep it clean then. They're bothered by the fact that they don't give a crap about what's going on. And they didn't realize it as acutely prior to COVID lockdown, meaning people could be home and learn different ways, right? So I spoke with a ton of students who were saying, like, as soon as I realized that I could learn that thing from physics in a way more interesting way by hopping onto YouTube, finding somebody that was teaching in a way I liked, why do I want to sit here in the classroom? Why do I want to stay here, right? So this feeds into the problems that you're talking about with teachers because they know when their students aren't engaged. Yes, to a certain degree, you need to see what the measures are down the line. But also, if you ask any teacher that's still awake, right? That's not just there because they're waiting until they get
Yeah.
they know when their students are engaged or not. The way that you measure engagement is to ask the teacher, are your students engaged? The end, right? Like that's actually the way that, because they can tell, they can feel the dynamic, and they are burned out and frustrated that their students don't care. The students are burned out and frustrated that they don't care. Everybody wants them to care more. They have terrible strategies for dealing with it. There's XYZ reasons that I won't get into because I'm nerding out on the topic. But for advancing what you're trying to do, if your goal is to say, hey, we know there's more and more states passing laws now that financial literacy is going to be required in the high school curriculum. Just happened in Pennsylvania, right? They're having to like implement it throughout things here. It's happening. It happened in Florida a little while ago, right? So this is becoming more and more of a national trend. If that's the thing that you're wanting to jump in on, and you're going, hey, the unique thing that I think we can provide is, I'm realizing overall there's issues with engagement. If we can hit the vector of new state mandates around financial literacy, with the difference in our thing is your students will actually care about it. That I think you're right that there is likely to be something there. But all the pieces, the conversations that are happening here around like really making sure you're clear about what the problem is the problem that you're wanting to solve is students are going to like this so much that it's going to kind of spread, because like the teachers are going to be jazzed seeing the students' excitement. They're going to talk about it. They're going to ask their principals to get that curriculum right. Is it going to be kind of the like Canvas model, which is how Canvas spread throughout so many colleges, is they went straight to the adjuncts who had no money to pay them, and they made it available and said, this works so much better than the learning management system that you're using right now. Like Blackboard's a piece of crap. The information sent is terrible, blah, 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 right? Like use this instead. They got them so excited that they went and advocated for their schools to adopt that LMS. That's a much longer through line on paying out, though, to Jon's point, right? So really getting clear on like, you're right, engagement is suffering. You're right, financial literacy is something that needs to be happening at the high school level. But what's the unique thing that you are particularly equipped to solve, and you have enough runway and resources to solve it? And how are you going to be paying attention to, and who are you selling it to, right? Because naming engagement, lots of people will talk about it. But back to that early point of like, what's the top 3 problems they're solving? They just need to solve the problem of mandatory adoption. So they might want engagement, but they're not going to pay for engagement, right? And so thinking about it as like, that's the nice to have that they really want. It will cause teachers to be happier. It'll give them it'll make them a stickier customer, but it's not going to be the problem that up front, the people who are paying are generally willing to solve, in my observation. And so when you're thinking through like, the problem are you solving, back to that original question, you've got to really think about, Ty's point about Bloom's taxonomy is spot on, but like, really, what is it that their school boards are currently giving them a bunch of crap that they're failing at, right? That's where they're going to feel the pressure to invest money, is what they're getting grief on. If you're talking about the people that are making those bigger paying decisions about adopting something like a curriculum and a particular program for ed tech, for running that curriculum inside the schools.
Got you.
Rebecca, is the French kissing life? Is this you? This is your podcast?
No, I guested on the French kissing life. My podcast is the same as the title of my book. Can you help me give a SH asterisk?
I thought that's what I was Googling. I was trying to get outside of the LinkedIn bubble. So I just Googled it from scratch, and the French kissing one.
That was one of the ones that I guessed it on. But
right, Jon, it's a title of a book. You can't say she cursed because it's the title of a book. Leave her alone.
Literary. Got it.
Yeah. No censorship. Free speech. Free speech. Long live Becca's
Adam,
book.
are we in the?
Yeah, we are. That's why I felt comfortable, throwing in a, what's it called? Distraction, whatever.
Oh,
yeah.
There you go.
I'm okay. All right, so here's my, it's on point, but it's an exercise so that we can, because I know, Jon with an H, the qualifying customers, I know you have a lot of that worked out, so I don't want to take time away from you, but we're going to send him that. Craig, I know you have some specific things, like, and Wendy too. Well, everyone. Tell me if this makes sense, and then we'll just freeform. Since there's so many segments involved, I want to literally lock in a list of the top 3, maybe even the top 5, but no more than the top 5. I want to know what you need to learn from them. So I want to swing back to the learning objective piece. The how you're going to learn it, Jon put something in the, about structured experiments. We've spent years and years, like, what's your, like, I believe this customer will take this action by this date. Even my son is now finally learning about smart hypotheses or smart goals, like in school. So I can like be helpful there. Can't help with the new math, but the smart hypotheses I can help. I think how you learn that, a lot of us are going to want to chime in. I want to invest the time now that we have all these brains in one room. It can be pretty quick, but like a minute on each. The segment, but not just school. It's got to be an individual at a school. And so an individual role, what do you want to learn from them? And then the bonus there is putting it in the what problem are you solving versus the what pays bucket. And so if you have those three things, there's a feasibility piece, like product piece. But let's try to go for just either desirability or viability. Who has the problem? What do you want to learn from them? And which bucket, which side of the coin of, and again, some customers will be payers, but at least calling them out twice if you need to, and really being specific about that. So who's the first? Let's do the first one. So like a Mad Lib, so that we at least know what I'm saying. Who's the primary segment you want to learn from going forward?
I think after hearing everyone's feedback, which I do appreciate, I think this is good information. Is definitely, I want to start talking to those board of education numbers. Maybe I don't know how the school work, but I'm pretty sure the board of education, they don't know. Okay. whoever is that.
You want to talk to the head of curriculum in the district. So you want to talk to the person that's working. You don't want to talk to the superintendent. You don't want to talk to the assistant superintendent. There are people under the assistant superintendent. The title varies by district, who make the decisions about the curricular adoption for the district. Those are the people you want to talk to. The members of the board, their job is just to give a bunch of grief to the superintendent, basically. The people who make the decisions about curricular adoption, their title varies, but that's what you're looking for. Those are the people that will make the buying decision about the type of product you're talking about.
Okay. And that's what I need to do research on, is how the school system works, because I didn't even know that. So I think that's one, but also that's the person I would want to talk to next.
I think it depends on the problem you want to solve.
Okay.
So if I was going to sell something to education, I would want to go to the principal of the school.
Okay.
But figure out what are the teachers complaining about the most that he or she can't get to, and then go talk to a whole bunch of other principals. And when I start seeing a theme, then I'm going to roll my way up to the way that Rebecca is talking about it, because now I've got data and I'm taking all these principals with me. It's not just me saying it's a problem. It's all these principals saying it's a problem.
Got you. Okay.
That's just me. That's one approach. That's the way I would do it.
Okay. Well, there's room for 5 of these, so let's keep them clean. This is the only thing I'm good at. So, director curriculum, what does he want to learn from them? So it can be either Javian or Becca. No one else. What does he want to learn from the what is it? Head of curriculum?
Yeah, say head of curriculum. There's usually a few. There's going to be one that's like humanities focused, one that's math and science focused. Financial might be more likely to hit the side of the science and math focus. My recommendation would be that what you want to learn from them is, what are you currently looking at in the role of financial literacy in your high school programs? How are you currently using a program to address those financial literacy needs? Some places solve it via their math program, right? So they just have a financial literacy math course. So how are you currently solving that problem of student financial literacy? Well, is it a problem? How are you currently solving that problem? What curriculum is being used to do that? Is that something that you are making active decisions about changing or considering changing in the next couple of years? That's the set. If you want to understand that potential customer basis, Jon is spot on that is a longer buying line, but they're the ones, if you're talking about a product that gets adopted at a district level, they're the ones that make that decision. Principals don't get to make those decisions. Principals can make the decisions about programs that are brought in, but if you don't want to deliver a service, you want to deliver a product, you have to have somebody that's working in the district office.
Okay.
Love it. All right, so you sort of answered both ways. Yeah, go, Wendy.
Can I just throw a wrench in all of it, just real quick? Because why not? Why aren't you talking to banks who are going to get these students to be their customers in the future and want them to have good exposure to financial literacy and definitely have money to put towards educating young people on financial literacy and have money for gamified tools to educate not only kids, but kids to have better sort of skills related to financial literacy?
All right, so wrenches are completely fine objects to throw. So that's the who. Banks are not humans. So who's the human? What does he want to learn from them?
It's
How?
probably an innovation, someone who's running like an innovation department, like a product, an innovation in a bank, or like I'm working on a project with a bank right now, and it's the VP of innovation that brought my project in. So I would say it's somewhere around that sort of circle of influence, and looking to solve the problem of having better tools and resources so that they're creating better, more financially sound young adults getting into the world, and then taking out things like student loans, car loans, and being better positioned for like bigger financial purchases in their future.
All right,
It's
so wrap
interesting
up
you would
his.
say that. Hold on one second,
Go
just
ahead.
real quick. Let me do a follow up. That you would say that, Wendy, because I know, for instance, junior achievement here in Prince George's County, Maryland, every eighth grader has a junior achievement thing that they do for like a week over a semester, one of the quarters of the semester, which is meant to do that. How many of those kids are going to remember that by the time they become a freshman in college and that first person come along
Yeah,
and
when
say,
they're signing
you want
paperwork for
this credit
student
card?
loans, just agreeing to everything and taking
Exactly.
their first credit card. Yeah.
Exactly. And so the question then becomes, is it that if that's an engagement process, the junior achievement thing, it's an engagement process. And here in Maryland, these kids actually are now having, it becomes part of a class, like the financial, but are they retaining anything? Do they see the relationship between what happens in the classroom and what's going to happen in a couple of years? And can they hold it? I'm curious about that. And I think that the experience that I've had with Javion is from the very beginning with the financial aid pieces. No, no, they just as dumb as bricks, right? Because they just haven't figured it out. So there's nothing that allowed them to retain all that good stuff that happened. I don't know, it's because it was a boring lesson. The teacher was uninspired. The curriculum was old. It didn't meet
Or a gap in
whatever it might be.
repetition. You don't do it between grade 8 and
Exactly.
grade, like your first year of university. There's no sort of upkeep of that.
Exactly. Which I think gets back to the taxonomy thing, which goes from can you identify a square all the way up to being able to make super complicated geodesic forms that have nothing to do with whatever you learned in the classroom. That's all. I'm over. You're back on, Adam.
The problem is that a startup can't start to solve everybody's problem. They have to solve a specific person's problem. And that specific person's problem just has to be enough of them that you're cash flow positive. Don't even have to change one whole school district. You just need to be cash flow positive to have a place to breathe. And so starting with, I'm going to eat the whole elephant is a great way to starve to death. And so going and finding a little tiny thing that you can get paid for this week that causes me to learn something that lets me get more people next week that builds the amplifier will make a lot of difference. And that comes from picking specific people to ask specific questions to.
Hey, Jay, do you see what Rebecca put in the, we've talked about what she put in the chat about hyperlocal, going and solving a very narrow, to John's point, a very narrow problem set, and run that experiment. Right? We've already talked about this in some ways. You ain't got to do everybody. Just find somebody that you know. For instance, the high schools. Thank you, Rebecca. The high school seniors about to go off to college, to make sure they don't lose their minds when they go away. So you prepare them and run the experiment there.
Okay.
So let me urge you to think that the first 3 steps of your sales funnel are content. So a lot of the things you can do at the beginning is to just generate content content that is attractive to the audience you care about, and then have a step where they have to pay to get through the door to prove that they're actually customers.
Oh, dang.
It wasn't me, I swear.
Good game too.
he has like a very definitive. We'll reshare this process. I was going to make a joke that Jon let me have all these people, so I'm not going to let him also make me go over time. So I want you to have the last 5 minutes, but I feel like we have 1 more minute for another technique. Like, Craig, do you want to do any bifurcation stuff or follow on to the filtering?
I would love to do a quick piece of bifurcation, and just so Jay understands bifurcation, we're going to ask questions that have 2 answers, and you can't say the word both.
Okay.
So you're coming to my house for dinner, and I'm going to ask him, what do you want for dessert, ice cream or cake?
Ice cream.
Okay, chocolate or vanilla?
Vanilla.
Soft or hard?
Soft.
So soft vanilla ice cream. So the goal is every time you ask a question, you're breaking down into one, like you divided the audience in half. So all the people that could come to my house, I'm only going to pick the people that want to have soft vanilla ice cream.
Got you.
I'm going to give you a different example. Chemical-free cleaners underneath the kitchen sink. Lady came to me and said, parents are the customers. It's not parents, it's moms or dads. Who cares more about chemical-free cleaners underneath the kitchen sink, moms or dads?
Moms.
Moms. Okay, do these moms have 1 kid or more than 1 kid?
More than 1.
No, they only have 1 because they're worried the most when their first child comes along. When child 2 or 3 comes along, they don't worry as much. Do these
Nobody cares about those kids. I'm a second kid. No one cares.
So, and then these moms that have that 1 kid, are they over the age of 35 or under the age of 35?
Under the age?
Over the age of 35. They waited so long to find the right guy to finally get pregnant and not have something go wrong. So we know just by asking 3 bifurcation questions, moms, 1 child over 35. Bifurcate the audience, figure out who's that guy or gal who's most likely to become your customer. Super simple, super effective.
Got you. It's a good game.
If you don't pay anything, pay attention to that, bud, because that'll be the quiz next week.
Got you. No,
that's awesome.
I'm
Thank you, Craig.
So when we run startup weekends, we go from idea to revenue in the weekend, right? Mm-hmm. And when we do our customer focus, just like Craig was saying, where we focus in really tightly and we find that thing, 30 to 40% of the teams can get to revenue, and the revenue is not revenue to make money. It's revenue to prove that people care enough about this to lean in, right? Which then are the people to go interview and say, what did you really mean?
Got you. Okay.
All right, watch this close. What was your plan for the next 2 weeks before the call? What's your plan now?
Next 2 weeks was to sit down and start talking with those people from the board of ed, the superintendents, the teachers, and the students about like what is engagement and dig deeper on that. Do I have a plan right now after this call? My plan is to take this, turn it into a voice recording, punch it in AI, get the collective notes from it, and look over it, and then come up with a plan from that. That's the plan.
Sure. What piques your curiosity then, of all the viewpoints you've had here tonight? What is something that you're inclined to go check out more?
I think it's
pre-AI.
Like really finding out who's that person to talk to, and I think also digging deeper into like, okay, what are you actually solving? Because like we said, it's not engagement led more into trying to help with the scholastic scores, so it's like, okay, what do I really want? What's the goal here? Because originally it was like, you know what, when I started this, is clothing wasn't working out. I don't really like how the school system is, so let me just try to see if I can get into EdCat and jump into this. And I'm like, oh no, it's much deeper than this, sir. So how are you about to address this? So I think I really just kind of need to understand that, and once I figure out that and know who to talk to and ask these simple questions, and then really start seeing if I can start selling, then that'll be able to help me have a better understanding of how I should be able to attack. So I mean, and that's just my honest opinion, or answer, should I say.
I like it.
I wanted you to have the final word, but I can't close this down without knowing the chat was saved. Jon?
I'll save the chat. Don't worry about that. So go ahead and take us home, Adam, and then I'll take us off the air.
I think we're home. Javen, go. I'm just great. This is my dream. I want to make this model work for both sides of this marketplace, the mentor-mentee So I'm grateful for all of you, and see you next month.
All right. Thanks, Javian. Thanks for all the guest hosts, and see you next week.
Stay healthy, everybody.